Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor David Hughes. I'd like to welcome members of the public, council members and council staff to this session of the Special Infrastructure Environmental Services Committee. I'd start with the statement of acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is traditional lands for the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to living Kaurna people today. We do have an apology for Councillor Shanks and at the moment Councillor Little, do we have any motions to grant leaves of absence? Feed? Okay. We're apparently just having an issue with the live feed, so we'll just wait a second. Okay. So I'll move to motions to grant leave of absence. Yes, Cody's got.
Yeah, for Councillor Paul Little from the 15th to the 30th of March inclusive. And
that's seconded by the Mayor, Mayor Redran. All those in favour of that, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Public open forum. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in the public open forum? Declarations of interest. Any councillors? Declarations of interest? No. I'll move to item 5, officers' report. This is a public hearing, so what we are hearing is the information tonight. We're not debating the merits tonight. There will be some notes taken from the presentations and used for a future council meeting, but tonight we are receiving these representations, and I do thank people for coming to make the deputation. So I'll start with Mr. Trevor White, please, on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Breyer, 15 Blanche Street, Gawler East.
In Blanche Street, and I'm sure that given the opportunity, if you want to ask Mrs. Breyer any questions, she'll be only too pleased to answer them for you. I guess the initial things that we want to talk about is when the family were first advised that there was potential for their property at 15 Blanche Street to be elevated from a contributory item to local heritage status, there was a degree of anger. They were certainly upset. They felt disappointed, and they also felt that the control of the property was actually taken away from them now and was now in the hands of council and the state government and the pending Planning and Design Code. Planning and Design Code's yet to be released and won't be released until Friday. And the Breyer family found immediately that there would be a financial impact on insurance of the building being elevated from contributory item to local heritage status. Purchase of a dwelling, of course, is one of the biggest purchases that people make in a lifetime. The Breyer family have spent all of their life actually developing and living in other locations, bettering themselves along the way until October 2004, when they purchased their forever home. So they class this dwelling at 15 Blanche Street as their forever home. They don't want to get rid of it. They want to restore it. And since that time, in the 17 years that they've had it, they've spent considerable time, effort and monies in restoring the building to its current status. We understand that the Planning and Design Code's the catalyst for the change. Sure, legislation change from time to time, but council doesn't have to accept that change. Council could quite easily have said to the state government, we're not in favour of deleting contributory items and having them taken over as representative buildings, but rather we want contributory items carried over. There's 604 of them actually in council's development plan currently. So of the 604, 150 people, my client believes have been penalised because the government wished to only elevate some contributory items to local heritage status. The criteria under which the property at 15 Blanche Street was used to elevate the property was selected on A, D and E out of section 23 of the Development Act. Research undertaken by my client indicates quite clearly that Dr. Marnie never lived at 15 Blanche Street. Yes, the property at 15 Blanche Street was part of what was known as Marnie's paddock. However, Dr. Marnie lived at 11 Blanche Street in a house called Yenda. He never ever lived at 15 Blanche Street. There was some credence given to John Callaghan. John Callaghan being a councillor of the town in the years 1884 and 85. Research undertaken by my client also indicates that the dwelling was under construction in 1884 and 85, and it was also up for sale. So John Callaghan never lived in the house either. So therefore, we find that A and E of the criteria that's been used for elevation of the property at 15 Blanche Street's misleading. Further information as revealed by my client is that Marnie and Callaghan have already had some notoriety. We're having streets named after them, and Dr. Marnie having Blanche Street and Edith Street named after his daughters. In addition, the local heritage listing has a significant impact. Under the current planning scheme, Schedule 3 allows certain activities to happen that are not deemed to be development. And I've listed those in my submission. Simple things like the installation of a garage, carport, construction of shade sails, repairs, maintenance, internal alterations, painting of the building, and simple things like the installation of photovoltaic cells, albeit with conditions attached to it, except if it's a local heritage building. So that impacts greatly again on what my client can do with their property. The unknown policy provisions, the new planning and design code, as I said, is not released until Friday, including what is known as the heritage overlay. We got no idea what's in the heritage overlay, and neither do the council staff either, because they haven't had access to it or very limited access to be able to have a look at what the overlays actually curtail. So my client's desired outcome is that the state government carry over the existing contributory item listed at 15 Blanche Street as a representative building and not elevate it to local heritage status. The state government transfer all of the contributory items or 15 Blanche Street, Gawler, listed in the council's development plan under the new planning design code and not elevate it, the existing contributory item, to local heritage status, and that the state government compensate the owners of 15 Blanche Street for the increased financial burden imposed and increased insurance premiums, increased maintenance costs, and increased development costs in the future. And my client feels that if they want the building elevated to local heritage status, they can buy it. Mrs. Breer would be quite happy to answer any questions that the panel may ask.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Mrs. Breer on this actual presentation itself? Councillor Tooley.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So the crux of this, I think, is that you're saying because you purchased it in 2004, knowing what it was and with its listing as a contributory item, you then moved ahead with your plans under that particular
realm.
ruling.
Yes, we did. Yes.
And that now, and I'm not fully intimate with all of the clauses, but it seems to me what you're saying is that for it to now be elevated to heritage, that brings with it a whole load of other things which would change the way you may or may not be able to continue your renovations.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. In purchasing our property, we actually did some homework on it, and we actually came to council at the time to ask what implications contributory was, and if it would be further elevated to state to the local heritage listing. And at that time, and I know that it is council employees that we talk to and not council, but we were also given information that council had made attempts previously to elevate it and that they hadn't succeeded, and in moving forward it wouldn't happen. So in purchasing our property, we were under that impression that it wouldn't happen.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Chair?
Yeah, it's, as I've said, it's actually on the presentation. For Councillor Tooley, you just basically summarised the presentation. You didn't really ask anything about in detail in your question, but please, if you could make the question to the point, please.
Yeah, look, I'm really interested in helping people. I don't want to get caught up in semantics of whether it is technically a question or not, so I'll just keep going and, you know, you want to bring your gap on however you can. My second question...
Councillor Tooley, can you please not engage in debate with the chair? You're here to ask a question, not to have a go at the... Yeah. If you'd ask the question in a correct manner.
Mr. Trevor White, you made a point that you thought...
Councillor Tooley, can you turn your microphone on so the live stream can actually hear?
Sorry, I thought it was still on. You made a point that you thought council had a choice and could have chosen not to have that shift from contributory to heritage. Could you just expand on that, on your belief around that? It sounds like you have a view or legal grounds for saying that we could have, but we didn't.
No, I
So
don't. I mean, my argument, councillor, is based on the fact that of the 604 contributory items, only 150 have been selected as a representative sample, and that was selected by council. So my client believes that her property, being one of those selected, then any future development on it has been taken away from them and is now in the hands of council and the state government.
And again, you referenced clauses A and E, and I'm not intimately familiar with those, but it sounded like it was as if there was an argument because of this certain people living in this dwelling at that time, this would be grounds or part of the grounds for the shift from contributory to heritage.
That's correct. That's correct. And this, my understanding, from somebody who has no understanding of the planning field, but legislatively, I do have some understanding. The elected member, our house has been put forward previously, prior to us purchasing it, to be elevated to local heritage. Didn't succeed. The only difference now is because council has decided that the property will be elevated because Mahoney owned the property, right? Well, actually, in your correspondence to us, if you actually read it, it's a little misleading because it's actually saying Mahoney lived in the house. Mahoney didn't live in the house. It has 2 elected members that owned the property, right? Well, high respect for elected members, but they weren't the first elected members of the town of Gawler, and they certainly won't be the last. And our property, being on Mahoney's land, you need to have a look at the other properties that are on there as well, that were subdivided. It's not because Mahoney lived on the land. You're saying it's because Mahoney owned the land, right? That's in crux my response. Mahoney did not own our house. He did not build our house. Our house was part of the property, Mahoney's land, whatever you want to call it, that he owned, and it was subdivided. So elevating the house because elected members lived in it, from a ratepayer's perspective, I don't believe is really warranted. And mark my words, you all do an incredible job for the council, but you are elected for the people. The people elect you to do a job. You shouldn't be putting a property, elevating a property because an elected member lived in it, particularly when it wasn't the first elected member of Gawler. I think it was 30, 40 years into council being in tow.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, Councillor Valonga.
Councillor Valonga, so you don't mind if it stays contributive?
Happy for it to stay contributed, not as a local heritage listing.
Okay.
And that, you know, and I'm probably speaking out of turn, but council actually makes that decision. It's not the state body that's making that decision.
Yeah, I understand that.
Elected members are making this decision.
Councillor Davies.
So just around what the actual restrictions are, is that the part that we're waiting on the new planning and design code before we know what will change, or do you have an idea at the moment of what extra restrictions might happen?
I think that's actually a question through to Ryan, not to the rest.
Sure.
Whether you want to save that for later on or...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Councillor Davies. Any other further questions that represent? I'd like to thank you very much for your deputation. I think it's very important that the facts are corrected if they're incorrect, and I think it's really good that Mr. and Mrs. Bry came along as well as your representative. So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I'll again call Trevor White of Planning Solutions on behalf of the Nessie family for Adelaide Road, Gawler South. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I have Mr. Frank Neske with me, and if the panel wish to ask any questions of Mr. Neske, he's quite happy to do it. This property relates to number 8 Adelaide Road, that's located on the corner of 7th Street and Main North Road, and was purchased by the Neske family in May 2019. At the time they purchased the property, again, was listed as a contributory item, and it was previously used by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources as an office complex. The building, as we've outlined, has some interesting features. One of the features being the turret at the front of the building. And when it was purchased, Mr. Neske and his family bought the property, knowing very well that it was a contributory item, and understood that he was able to work around those restrictions of the property being an actual contributory item. Some of the interesting things that we've come across is that the veranda at the front of the property actually needs replacing. But as we've found with other heritage listed buildings, is that codes and design practices change over time. When this building was built in the turn of the century, the veranda was formed using single span sheets of corrugated iron. Unfortunately, design codes change, and now we find that that veranda needs bracing to be able to comply with the current design standards, and that of course disfigures the building. There's actually portions of the building or the property that are not listed as the in the heritage item that's going to be elevated to local heritage status. There's an annexure on the southern side of the building that's connected to the main building by a covered walkway. There's an enclosed veranda at the rear of the building that was an extension. And of course, there's a shed in the corner, which is also part of the heritage listing. The Neske families are migrants. They came to this country, had nothing. They settled in the Riverland, and then through hard work, they built their first house in the Riverland. Building houses in the Riverland has got a limited opportunity. So they came to Gawler to be able to expand their business. For a number of years, they operated out of a building not far from McDonald's on the Main North Road. In 2019, they were forced out of that building and had to relocate to their current premises, number 8 Adelaide Road. Again, the unknown practices are the simple things, being located on a corner, simple things like installing photovoltaic cells in order to reduce their energy consumption is a difficult task, because doing that, part of the conditions attached to installing photovoltaic cells on a local heritage listed building, so they can't be viewed by somebody standing on a public road on the adjoining road. So if you take out Main North Road and 7th Street, it's pretty difficult to put any sort of effective photovoltaic cells on to generate any renewable energy. And that's the penalty you pay for having your building elevated from contributory item to local heritage listing. Again, the design planning and design code's not released till Friday. We don't know what the new legislation will bring for heritage listed buildings. We don't know what the heritage overlay will encompass. So these people, unfortunately, are being told that their property's been selected for elevation to local heritage status on the basis that we don't know what the new planning regime has got in store for heritage listed buildings. As I indicated in the previous submission, Schedule 3 allows activities to happen unless it's local heritage listed building. And the desired outcome for this property is no different to the one at Blanche Street. So the desired outcome from Mr. Neske is that the state government carry over the existing contributory item for 8 Adelaide Road that's listed in their current development plan as a representative building and not elevate it to local heritage status. Again, the existing contributory item is a representative building under the new planning and design code and not elevate it from contributory to local heritage status. And Mr. Neske's of the opinion also that if those financial implications are imposed on somebody that's struggled to get their business to where they are, then the government should either compensate them or buy the building, and Mr. Neske would be quite happy to lease the building back off the government if they so desired to purchase it. I'm quite happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Mr. Neske will answer any questions that the panel may have.
Any questions, please, councillors? Councillor Tooley, could you please? Thank you.
Thank you again for your presentation. What do you believe was the basis in this property for its elevation? In the previous one, you expanded on reasons such as you believe who lived there and some of that history. What do you believe was the reasons for this elevation?
The elevations are exactly the same as the previous, probably A, D and E, that it displayed some historic, economic and social theme. It displayed aesthetic merit and design characteristics. Local personality, namely Adolf Dickman, who constructed many of the dwellings located in Gawler South today.
Do you have any basis to challenge those? That in the previous one there was a bit of a you challenged some of the historical. Do you have a basis for challenging, i.e. you disagree with the aesthetics or the historical record? Or
no, we don't dispute those. What we are disputing is that the fact that it's a commercial building currently, that if the state government insisted on this building being elevated to local heritage status, then Mr. Niski's made it quite clear that he only wanted the footprint of the original building to be listed and not any of the annexure buildings or the extension or the shed at the back. The existing shed at the back consists of 2 walls that were stone and the rest of it's colorbond steel cladded. So hardly an item that warrants being elevated to local heritage status.
thank you.
Councillor Valonga, you've got a question, please.
Yeah, staff a question?
Is it on this exact matter or?
Yeah, on this matter, yeah.
Yeah, okay, certainly through the chair then. Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure who, would it be Ryan?
It may be. We'll
Right.
see what the question
Okay.
is.
What's the difference? They can't knock the building down if it's just contributive, can they?
No, thanks, Ryan.
Through the chair, under the current planning framework, the demolition of state or any state, local or contributory is permissible, but there are certain tests that need to be conducted in which approval is granted to do so. So it's not the fact that you can't demolish either a contributory item, a local item or a state heritage item. It just has to be based on sound grounds and an assessment process to undertake that.
Thanks. Councillor Tooley, you have another question?
Again, through you, Chair, it might go to Ryan. It seems that one of the problems that delegations are saying is that if it gets raised to the next status, the things they may want to do, they may not be allowed to do, or they could be more problematic. Is that an absolute black and white, or would they have to go through an application process? So let's say it was to change that veranda or to change that shed or to put solar PV in. Is it going to be automatic no, or do they have to, if it's elevated, now go through some more red tape to get it achieved?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, when development is proposed on a contributory item, a local item and a state heritage item, greater consideration needs to be taken into what development is going to occur and the impact it will have on that property from a heritage perspective. So greater consideration in the assessment process needs to be taken into consideration as part of that development assessment.
Right, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sample?
Thank you, Chairman. I must have lost something here, and I heard the words of Mr. Pryor said there before, but this is the first time that I've heard this at a council as councillors. And I would like to ask a question maybe to Mr. White. who was it that elevated these problems to, or suggested, instructed, or what? Who was it our staff? Was it our, I mean, it wasn't us sitting here. This is the first time we've heard of him. So I think, you know, if I've missed something, I'm sorry, but I would just like a clearer point.
Councillor Sample,
Yep.
this is a major process where we looked at shifting contributory items across as heritage items. So this isn't the first time at all, unless do you have another question?
No, maybe I missed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sample. Any further questions, councillors? Again, yeah, I'd like to thank the Neski family for coming along tonight, and presentation from Mr. Trevor White. And as I've said at the start of the meeting, there will be a response to these deputations. They will be responded to in a future council meeting. Tonight was to actually just have a hearing of these deputations, and that's been the case. Do we have a representative of Leighton Funds here tonight? Don't think so. If not, councillors, yeah, I'd like you to, we've got a mover from the Mayor. Would you like to speak on the motion now, Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I'd just like to say something.
Sorry, Mr. Nessie, we've finished your deputation. Thank you for coming along tonight.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I'm moving the motion. Thank you to everyone who came along tonight and provided deputations. This has been quite a lengthy process. 150 properties out of over 600. We've had a small number of objections that we've heard of tonight, and I think that reflects the robustness of this process. I think that in regard to some of the comments by Mr. White, that no, we don't know the final outcome of the code, but I know that staff have been working very closely with the department and informing and getting feedback on things like heritage overlays, etc. So they have formed, and let's hope some of that information goes in. So I don't think it's a case that staff don't know exactly what's in there. I think there's been a lot of feedback and collaboration, which is what you need when you have extensive planning reforms such as this. So the state government is saying that the new planning code will be better. So I guess we'll wait and see whether that is in fact the case. However, I think that, yeah, certainly this has been a very robust process. We've had, I think it would have been good to have had some of the reflections of our heritage advisor in the report. However, I think that would be good to have that circulated for elected members. Certainly, I'm formally requesting that I get a copy of that so that we can understand where staff were coming from as well, so we get a balanced view. But I think, Chair, that I'll leave it at that for the moment and look for people's support in this fairly straightforward motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I will clarify that it's my understanding now Douglas Alexander will be responding and we will get a report to Council from these presentations tonight. So do we have a seconder to this motion? Councillor Fraser, would you like to speak? Thank you.
I'd just like to make it clear that there's no decisions being made tonight. This is basically just noting that that we've got this report. So, you know, there is actually no decisions tonight. It's just accepting what we've heard, and then that will come out later on. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Fraser. Any other speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Tooley.
A question first. Regarding the quoted 150 of the 640 that have been elevated, and given that we've gone through a consultation process, is it intended that that 150 will be reviewed and that we will, based on the delegations, based on the feedback, that the list may well be adjusted and this will come before us for a decision down the track?
I'll put that through to Ryan. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, and as the chair has explained, this was a formal process under the Development Act. Section 25(13) of the Development Act requires us to now form a summary of written submissions and verbal deputations, to collate them, to provide some commentary and a response in relation to those points that were raised, and to ultimately recommend amendments to the draft DPA, which may result in changes to those 150 properties that have been assessed as being eligible for local heritage transition. Obviously, there are a criteria, 7 criteria against which the local heritage, the contributory items have been assessed to determine whether they are eligible for local heritage status. So a report will be coming back to council outlining responses and proposed amendments to that effect.
So, Councillor Valenoghi, you've got a question?
Through you, Chair, to Ryan. Would the people who own those houses, the 150 or so, would they have an opportunity in writing from council to say what is going to be happening to their property?
Yeah, my understanding is that's what tonight is. So the people have had that response tonight, so they've done that. But unless Ryan wants to clarify that any further, if you please.
Yeah, that is correct. Council has written to all the property owners, giving them an opportunity to make representations, and that is exactly what these people here tonight have taken the opportunity to do so.
Councillor Davies, you had a question from before as well, so whether you wanted to...
Yeah, so just in terms of the planning and design code, I guess, well, so firstly, when this next comes up for review of these submissions, will we also be getting alongside it more information on the planning and design code and what the implications are of what changes, you know, someone would have to make if their house did change category and that sort of thing?
Yes, that is correct. The report will be most likely, in fact, I'm pretty confident, be presented to the April council meeting, and which time we will have time to assess the code, which will be released this Friday. And given that that was a clear point of discussion by their representatives today, that aspect will be addressed in that submission.
Sure. And just follow up, in terms of when we make that motion will be, we're basically providing commentary to the state government. Yes, we don't have any decision-making power on this other than to just put our suggestions through. Is that where we're at this stage of the process? Yeah,
through the chair, the ultimate decision maker is the Minister for Planning. Council can recommend or propose amendments to a development plan, but it is ultimately the decision of the Minister.
Sure, and the Minister will see these exact submissions will be not just a council summary, but the actual submissions that were made here will be sent through, or is it no?
We normally provide all the submissions through, plus a summary of submissions. So we have a summary of submissions with the actual attachments, okay, and how council has chose to amend or otherwise based on those submissions.
Yeah.
Any speakers for it? I'll go with Councillor Tooley was first, so Councillor Tooley.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, I'd like to speak. I will be speaking in favour of the motion because I think the motion summed up in the word receive and consider. And as long as we're true to that and that we do consider what's come before us down the track. This meeting was actually triggered because of your deputations. That's the ruling. I am a little disappointed, Mr. Neske, you didn't get a chance to speak. I don't think there's a time limit tonight. It will be finished very quickly. I don't think we're under any time pressures. And as per the questions that were asked, the intent is to try to get as much information as we can to help make a good decision from my point of view. So the more information I could have got tonight, the better. Having said that, I have a lot of empathy for the situation where you buy something under one set of rules and then the rules change. I've always been opposed to that process. I think if rules change, they should in some way affect those coming on and be affected by the new rules, but the retrofitting. And you've heard me talk about this before with, say, open space, when we've actually approved open space and then we were contemplating retrofitting it and cutting back grass and changing it, and I fought very hard against that. I support the view too, where people move into an area and that area has a classification. They should have the comfort of knowing that it's staying. And if you bought in Church Hill, for example, heritage area, and therefore you expected it to remain that way, and then suddenly a block of tennis courts are purchased off a church, and suddenly two-storey buildings are built, which are contradictory, you would be fighting that as much as you could. Same when people buy in an area such as Coachella Estate. Minimum is 2,000 square metres. Everybody that's bought in that area has bought that for that lifestyle. They've paid that sort of money. So they would expect it to continue that way. And so in the same way, I have empathy for that view that if I bought this under it being a contributory item, with my plans and my visions, I get that, I understand that. What I hope happens is, and again, I've been critical of us as a council regarding consultation, is that we can tick boxes and we can say we'll go through consultation, and I guess legally we do, we tick the box, we do it. What I think I don't see often enough is what I would call a fair and reasonable response to that feedback. And if I remind you of the delegations for the rural zone and the 95% of people that came and the 100 delegations that came to us and told us they want to change, and they've been ignored, that's been rejected. And so that's my fear with this. We've gone to 150 people, we've told them about this, we've had delegations, we've said to people, if you tell us, we will listen. I hope listening means that we will possibly act. If the arguments are reasonable, if the grounds are reasonable, then I would hope, as you quite rightly said, we are a reflection of the people who elected us. We are here to serve the people that elected us and the best interests of the town. Therefore, I think it would be a travesty if those 150 items come back to us unchanged. After people have written, we haven't heard from everybody. There was another one there tonight, we haven't heard from them, but we know that people have written to us and people have they've engaged professionals to represent them. This is not chief exercise either, to give their best shot at letting us know why they believe that their item should not move to heritage status. Some of the arguments I hear tonight, which I've heard for the first time, they resonate. I think that seems reasonable. So I really hope that the officers, as they prepare the reports for us, and then that we do justice to those reports and cut and look into them, because at the end of the day, it will be us as an elected body who will make a decision as to what does or doesn't stay on that list. And we need to do that very, very carefully. Yeah, I've got 30 seconds left, Mr. Annette. Because we are affecting people's livelihoods, we are affecting their futures. This does have a psychological impact on them when these pressures persist. I think I'll finish there.
Thanks, Councillor Tully. Councillor Sample, you'd like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'll certainly accept this report that we have here, but again, I've been very critical about the point of how community doesn't seem to come forward when these very important things come onto our plate. We have a development assessment panel, and we have here where 150 have been moved to heritage status, and we've got 10 persons that have actually sent something in. Is that all that was sent in, Ryan? Is only 10 persons out of 150?
So you'd like the question answered as?
Yep.
My understanding that's the 10 formal. There were other people that rang up and queried things like what the heritage listing meant. So that they did that informally. And just to clarify, it was only listing the items that were described, not the entire or any new additions and things like that. But I don't know if do any of the staff really need to add anything to that. Not really. No.
So there was only 10 out of 150?
Informal in writing, yes, that's correct. Anyone else like to, Councillor Vallelonga, you'd like to speak?
Is there any chance, through you, Chair, to Ryan, is getting the letter that was sent to those people? I'd like to analyse it. If that's possible.
I think it's, yeah, we've seen it already as councillors, but yeah, we have got that, Councillor Vallelonga, already.
Sometimes those things go underneath, when you're in meetings, sometimes.
Yeah, we have previously received that.
That's fair enough, but I like to see, this is pretty important.
Yeah, so there is a formal process as well with the notifications, but unless Ryan wants to clarify any of that, but we have seen it, and yeah, as councillor.
I'd like to see it again if it's
well, I believe it's in their reports. So, yeah, we'll send Councillor Vallelonga a copy. But yeah, it is a standard process. Any other questions or do we have a, yes, we do have a seconder. I'd like to put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. I'd like to, because it's just a meeting to go through this process, I close the meeting and the next ordinary meeting of the special infrastructure, next infrastructure environmental services meeting will be Tuesday, 13th of April, 2021 at 7 p.m. So thank you, councillor, and yeah, thank you for the deputations tonight.